Do you eat to live or live to eat? Many young people today are struggling to strike that right balance. From overeating to eating nothing, we carry our relationship with food throughout our whole lives. And whether we know it or not, our diet influences every aspect of our being, psychologically, emotionally, physically. Well, tonight, through personal stories and expert interviews, we dig in to find out how food consumes our everyday lives. I'm Joshua Sackheim, and you're watching EIV News Presents Consumed. These three stories will change the way you think about food. Have you ever eaten food grown from a roof? Well, you might soon. Two local farmers are producing Boston's first ever rooftop farm. Organic fruits and vegetables will literally grow on the roof of a city skyscraper. Could this trend lead to a new way of accessing fresh produce? Then we find out what happens when food becomes the enemy. For 23-year-old Tessa, food had controlled her thoughts, her relationships, and her emotions since middle school. As she begins recovering from her eating disorder, we see how the brain manipulates our perception of food. And whoever said fast food is bad for you? Boston's new food truck Clover is wheeling and dealing out healthy, locally grown produce. Is this evidence of a new evolution of fast food dining? But first, here in America, we have a variety of different foods to choose from. We have so much that each year we throw out almost half the amount of our food supply. Even while this food wastes away, that doesn't mean we aren't eating. In fact, by 2030, nearly half of the American adult population is predicted to be obese. That's right, not just overweight, obese. Obesity comes with a handful of deadly medical problems. Why is this happening, and is there a way to stop it? Our first guest tonight is an instructor in neurology at Harvard Medical School. He's also a member of the Boston Nutrition and Obesity Research Center through Boston University. And Miguel Alonso, thank you so much for being with us here today. You've done a lot of research on the brain and how brain behavior affects our eating habits. So let me ask you this, why are people so consumed with food?
Yeah, well, this is a complex question. The brain is involved in eating behavior in many different angles. So we are still learning a lot about that. Yeah, it has been estimated by researchers over the past years that the average US person makes between 200 and 250 decisions related to food every single day. Isn't that amazing? I mean, we go to a supermarket, we go to a restaurant, when we think about food, where we are confronted with, whether accepting a social invitation to go to a dinner or something like that, we are all the time making decisions. And we live surrounded by so many opportunities to eat that, decisions matter these days. Research so far suggests that there are some sort of three different systems in the brain. Let's call them 1, 2, and 3. On the one hand, system 1 interprets food as a source of energy, as a simple fuel, okay? System 1, basically, its purpose is to prevent starvation. And system 2 interprets food as a source of gratification, is the joy of eating. But beyond that, we also have what I believe is the most fascinating system, which is system 3. That is the system that has been more developed in humans as compared to other animals. And that's the system that actually allows us to eat based on goals, to use information such complex as health-related information to guide our eating habits.
And Miguel, I want to talk about the obesity epidemic in America. We keep hearing a lot about it. What role does the brain play in that?
It's a complex issue. I believe that there are many factors involved. The brain deals with that. It's biased toward preventing starvation, but not preventing overeating. And that's why, our brain is a little bit more lazy in terms of stopping what we eat. So I believe part of the why people still, overeat, and there is an increase in obesity, not only in the US, but it is a global phenomenon, has to do with this mismatch between our ability to exert control or inhibitory control over a very challenging environment that offers us 24/7 and countless opportunities to eat all the time, convenient food, appetizing food, with very little effort. What I would like to emphasize is that we are we're humans, and humans, we are made to eat socially, and we are made for eating, especially natural food that is not as, it doesn't have such energy dense. So and we are meant to eat in communities and sharing thoughts, conversations, and emotions.
What are some factors that contribute to how people perceive food?
We humans are born with innate preferences for certain foods and certain tastes, such as sweet and salty, and these are our primary preferences. But as we grow old, we become exposed to different foods and different environments, so we learn associations. For instance, if you enter a convenience store, you hardly see food exposed. You see packages that have brand, colors, letters, and things like that. So those letters predict what is inside the package because we have been exposed to the food and the association with that brand or that letter or that package for multiple years. So we know, and vision acts as some sort of a proxy or an anticipation of what the food is in there.
And that's a really interesting point. So people don't even need to see food to perceive food. They just need the suggestion of food.
Absolutely, yes.
Can you explain some of the brain-based experiments you've been researching that kind of go into, what people eat and how people control what they eat?
Perfect, yes. My research interests are pretty much centered on what we have been talking. So I'm trying to understand the brain and the mental fundamentals of eating behavior and try to help people lose weight more successfully.
We've been asking a question on the show. We've been asking people, do you live to eat or do you eat to live? Do you think the majority of people are one or the other?
So relationships with food evolve during life. What we see in this environment that is so challenging, you see a dichotomy. You see people who are extremely focused on eating, sometimes too much, like they are very obsessed with the way they eat and eating healthy and too much. And on the other hand, you see people who don't care at all, or people who cannot afford, having those thoughts because food, eating healthy, let's face it, in this country is very expensive. It's something that we probably we all have to work to make it more equal or provide more opportunities.
Well, Miguel, thank you so much for joining us. When we get back, Ali and Glacy is going to take a look at Boston's first ever rooftop farm and how that's going to change the way Bostonians get access to fresh foods. Right now, Bostonians rely on farmers markets to get their fresh produce, but soon you may only have to walk to the roof of your workplace.
Urban farming is hardly a new concept. Growing on small ground plots and on rooftops has flourished in cities across the country. Now Boston is establishing its roots in urban agriculture. Local organization Green City Growers pioneered the movement, first planting seeds in 2008.
Green City Growers is an urban farming business. We install and maintain urban farms for commercial and community locations to foster a deeper connection for people to the food that they eat. We also specialize in growing food in spaces that don't traditionally grow food.
Higher Ground Farm is Boston's first rooftop farm. We are located, or will be located, on the roof of the Boston Design Center in the Seaport District of Boston.
I started my career in reality television. I always wanted to work in food, and I grew up with a father who I would consider to be a professional hobbyist in all the culinary arts, and so I grew up on all sorts of food, and I always loved food.
I've always loved food. My family's been really into food. Like, my favorite thing was always going out to dinner. I was always really excited to do that. And we always had a garden, and I liked to cook, and my mom always was a big cook, so I think that just kind of seeped in where it just became something that was fun and a value of mine.
I spent the majority of my college years working on different farms during the summertime, and then traveled overseas to India to study biodynamic farming there.
In college, I just started getting really interested in the environmental fields. Really wanted to work, to solve environmental problems, essentially. In winter, it'll be like any other farm. We'll plant like a cover crop to hold the soil in place and add nutrients back into the soil.
Really, it's spent doing a lot of planning, January and February, kind of getting your crop plan ready for the year and planning out what you're going to grow, doing your seed order, which is kind of like Christmas for farmers.
We start gardening really April, and we grow all the way through till December because we do cold frames for season extension. And so we put kind of like a mini greenhouse lid on top of the beds, and you can get actually 2 months of extra growing out of having that on top of your raised bed.
And so what this does is it actually extends the growing season. It keeps it up to 30 or 40 degrees warmer than the air outside, which is great. And so if you can see, there's actually some stuff growing in here, even though it's been really cold.
We will be concentrating on growing salad greens, hardy greens, varieties of tomatoes, perennial and annual herbs.
We'll grow root vegetables, onions, herbs, all kinds of stuff.
There's still a whole range of fruits and vegetables that you can grow, and things that you would think would be warmer weather crops actually grow here, like okra. You can get really good tomatoes here, tons of stuff.
Our markets are essentially CSA, community supported agriculture, farm stand, and restaurants. That's what we envision for the first year anyways. We may do farmers markets and stuff like that in the future.
Let's say that you are a homeowner and you have a yard and you have no idea what to do with it and you're wondering if you can grow food out of it. One of us will come by and we have this great tool called a solar pathfinder where we can actually look at the light at different types of year. This is a really cool thing. So you put it has a reflective thing on it, and so it actually reflects the sky. So you look into it and it shows you a 360 of the sky that's above you, and it's got the different types of year and different times of day. And so it's the trajectory of the sun. So it's really cool, and you can actually just count the number of hours that the garden will get in the summer, spring, or fall.
We hope that we'll be able to sell a lot of what we grow in Southie itself. But we're hoping that, with the residents in Southie, the people that work here, and the restaurants, that we'll really be able to sell a lot of what we grow in Southie.
Well, I think, the mayor has been committed to urban agriculture, and they've formed a zoning committee to help make it accessible to people interested in growing food commercially in the city. I think having food grown closer to larger population centers is an important part of food security as well.
I think it's a good city for urban farming because people are excited and willing to participate in it. I think that people are very conscious of kind of what's going on in the food spectrum. It depends what community you're talking about, but I think there's a general support for quality produce here. There's a lot of great restaurants, and it's a big city, and it's a lot of people, but there's still available space. Well, the benefits of growing your food on site are kind of multifaceted. One of the nice things about growing your food on site is that the quality of the produce that you're getting is way higher than anything that you can really get from the market, because they're picking it either earlier in the day or a week earlier. If it's coming from the other side of the country, it's then kind of losing nutrients over time, and by the time you get it, it just doesn't have the kind of flavor that the food would have if you, say, went out the back door, harvested the food from the back alley, and then served it that day. And so the quality of the food that you're getting is a lot higher. It's great visibly to show your customers that you're focused on the quality of your produce. It's great to be able to actually go out to the garden while people are there and pick food and then use it in the dinner service, and people get really excited. John and I have been friends for a really long time. He
won't admit how long that is, but we're coming up on 18 years, so half our lives.
We met our freshman year of college, maybe like second day or something. We lived in dorms that were sort of opposite from each other.
We've seen each other through a bunch of different parts of our lives, and it's just really interesting to have known someone for so long and to now know that, I mean, in some ways I'm going to be spending the rest of my life with him. You know, we just signed a 10-year lease, and you know, it's incredible to be able to think about you know, kind of having to embarked on this project with him. And I don't think either of us really knew how big it was going to be or like how much attention we were going to get from it.
It's been a long road for us. Never would have dreamed we'd do this together. You know, we're able to be friends and have fun, but also when it comes down to working, we can work well together.
Well, I think like any startup, you know, it doesn't matter if you're building a farm or, you know, starting a small business selling pickles or making an app for an iPhone or whatever. You know, there's just general challenges of keeping yourself motivated, and I think that's one of the really great parts about being in a partnership with John.
Do you feel like your life is much richer now that you're, you know, got your hands in the soil?
Oh, my life is so much richer than working in reality television, yes. It's been really wonderful, kind of not only having the experience of building a business and building a successful business, but also being able to build a business that helps people eat better and be healthier and allows there to be more food security. And there's just so many things that we do that the kind of consequences of it are all really positive for people and their health.
I like the idea of creating something. You know, it's the same sort of mission of like environmental sustainability, food system sustainability, but this has been exciting to create an option for people.
I love my job, I really do. There's a lot of things that I really enjoy about this. I think one of the best things, or possibly my favorite thing about my job, is that what started out as an idea has turned into a job opportunity for a lot of people, and that we have actually a crew of full-time staff here. And so what was just me at the beginning is now 7 full-time staff, 3 part-time people, and 4 interns over the course of the year. And so it's just great to have a team of enthusiastic people and to watch this continue to grow and to have us be able to give more people an opportunity to have their life be growing food for people, which is extremely rewarding.
It's a lot of work that I don't get paid for, but it's fine. It's like, I mean, this is like literally my dream. I didn't know it was my dream, but like the more I've worked on this, it's just a very satisfying thing to set a goal that's for yourself, that you believe in. And this is literally something that we just built, like step by step by step, and no one's making us do this. I have no boss telling me what to do. It's myself. So I think for that, you know, that's like what keeps us going. Of just this is like our dream, and we're just working to make it real.
The goal of businesses like Green City Growers and startups like Higher Ground Farm is to bring food closer to the community. Jesse, John, and Courtney want to change the way that we look at food in the supermarket. They want to change the way that we eat. Reporting in Boston, I'm Allie Inglesi.
Thanks for that, Allie. I'm here with Greg Maslow. He's a farm manager with Newton Community Farm. And Greg, you've been an organic farmer for going on 8 years now. First of all, thanks for joining us. And after you saw the story that we just watched, you brought up an interesting point, which is you were talking about not only soil, but the size they have to work with on the roof.
Because I thought it was such an interesting idea. There is a huge opportunity, right? There's so many flat roofs in every major city in Boston and around the world that I think it's great that people are starting to think about how to utilize these not only for environmental reasons, but also producing food. But there were a lot of sort of unresolved questions that I had as a grower. For example, the cost to install these rooftop farms, whether open air or greenhouse, versus the payback period over which you're earning money from your vegetables. Part of that is that this is all very early. in development, and so a lot of what they're doing is sort of exploring models and trying to improve it. There were some questions about the ongoing cost, especially for the open-air greenhouses, in terms of soil. So there's a constant attention to trying to nurture your soil, which will in turn nurture your crops. And when you're having to do that on top of a building, I think it creates some logistical issues that I'd be interested in finding out how they're going to address those.
You know, there is I think this community aspect to organic farming. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. What's the value of having a community farm like that? The farm I work at, Newton Community Farm. We have programming for preschoolers through adults. One of the greatest things I ever see is little kids. We take them out to the field and we let them pull carrots, and they're shocked. We say, this is a baby carrot. It looks just like a carrot, but it's kind of small. And they think, well, no, a baby carrot looks like a little torpedo, and it comes in a plastic bag. And seeing sort of the benefits of organic farming, and it's led them to, you know, make choices in what they want to do with their life.
Yeah, so it sounds like these farms and these programs really are kind of fostering this love for, you know, land and farming in kids that seem to really stick with them.
Yeah. There's another side of this, which is that farming for a really long time had a very bad image. So I have a friend who's a farmer who grew up in Iowa, and his parents tried really hard to send him to college so that he wouldn't be a farmer, because it was not the future that they wanted for him. Now with the organic movement and the interest in organic fruits and vegetables, there's a really viable future for people who want to farm.
Is organic farming economically feasible?
It is. Farming in general is a low return business. It's not traditionally a really lucrative business. But now with the interest in organic farming, there's a premium that you get as an organic farmer for your produce. The vast majority of organic farms now, I think, are making a lot of money by selling direct to their customers.
People really seem to like the idea of organic food, be it truly organic or not. Why do you think here in Massachusetts especially, the idea of organic food has just become so popular?
Boston in particular has two things that are actually really important to organic farming and a little bit politically incorrect. One is we have a highly educated populace, and two, we have a fairly affluent populace. It's one of the things said about organics is that it's only for the wealthy or the people who can afford it. I know a lot of organic farmers really don't like that because most of us are fairly poor, and we don't want all of our work just going to feed sort of an exclusive group of people. But there's a lot of money and a highly educated population who's interested in their own health and the health of the environment. If
you were to take community farms and just get rid of them, what would be the repercussions of that?
There are repercussions on a whole range of levels. One repercussion is that we would be increasing the amount of fossil fuel that we burn, right? The average piece of food that you eat every day travels 1,500 miles. The caloric content of your breakfast this morning was less than the caloric content of the fuel, the oil, that it took to get that to your plate. It's shocking that, you know. Another one is that we continue to be alienated from our food. People are kind of horrified by the thought that meat is an animal, right? But I mean, if you're eating meat, you should recognize that this was a living creature and that it's not just a shrink-wrapped thing that sits in a refrigerator in a store, but you should consider where the source of your food comes from, because that makes you make more ethical choices.
So it sounds like community farming, really one of the positive side effects of that is that it really does bring you closer to your food.
Yes, I think that's the main goal, is just to re-engage people who aren't going to be on a farm of their own, give them a place where they can come and still engage with their food.
Well, Greg, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And coming up next, reporter Aaron Farley finds out what happens when food consumes the mind. Stay with us. Imagine spending every minute of every day counting calories and over-exercising. Tessa Merrick's routine consumed her life. She obsessed about her weight to the point where she never felt good enough. But now she's starting to turn her life around.
Tessa's height is 5'11", and in college she weighed only 125 pounds after an eating disorder took over her life. It all started in middle school when Tessa became insecure about being a bit bigger than the rest of her friends. She starved herself but quickly stopped, remaining healthy throughout her high school years. But right before college, her and a friend joined Weight Watchers. Horrified at seeing the number 169 on the scale, Tessa fell right back into the trap of anorexia.
I was horrified, basically. That number I never wanted to see ever again. And I started following the plan correctly, and the weight started coming off. I got compliments, it was fine, like I felt great, I felt just better physically, mentally. And then as the summer went on, going into freshman year, I started taking it to the extreme. I wanted more compliments. I wanted to feel better about myself. You lose 10 pounds, what happens if you lose 20? My friends starting to get concerned, like, what are you doing? You've lost enough by this point. And I had at that point, because I was at the weight that I couldn't go to Weight Watchers anymore. They wouldn't accept it, but they were just like, okay, you're good, stop. And of course I didn't, because I just got really attached to the whole lifestyle of it, the whole counting and just wanting to have a control of what I was doing. The second semester of sophomore year, I decided I was going to do a half marathon at the end of May. So I would do practice runs, go for 10 miles, come back and refuel with a Diet Coke. I was just slowly starting to isolate myself. I was really grumpy all the time. My poor mother, she, I was just such a bitch.
It's been a real roller coaster, and I'm not sure how to describe it. I think it was very shocking and very disturbing at first, but it took a little while for it to gel.
So I had two close friends that summer that sort of did hang on to me, even though I was just always telling them, no, I don't want to do anything. And they were also pulling away from me because they were uncomfortable with how I was starting to look and behave, and they didn't know what to say. And I understand that. It's a really tough subject to bring up to anybody because you don't know how the person's going to react. They could bite your head off or just have a meltdown. You don't know. So I do understand why they didn't want to tell me. And that weekend, they both went to York Beach in Maine, and that's somewhere that I'd always wanted to go with them because one of the girls has a house up there, their family does. And they went, without me, essentially, and they both lied about it. I was really upset about it. It's what am I doing so wrong? Why are people not hanging out with me? What is so wrong with me? That day, my brother was visiting with his wife. I was talking to Russell that day, what is wrong with me? These bitches, why are they not talking to me?
I know that sometimes if Tessa's in a foul mood, then, maybe because of her eating disorder, because of things going on in her mind, she can sometimes be difficult, and sometimes she requires more patience than a casual friend might be willing to give.
Yeah, and I think it was very hurtful. I mean, some of these girls were supposed to be her good friends. Instead of ditching her when she needed them the most, they should have been there to help her and encourage her and support her.
But I mean, to take their side of it a little bit, she was not a lot of fun. I mean, it's not a lot of fun to get a pizza and make popcorn with butter and pig out, and there's somebody going, no thanks, I'll just have some water, And it's less and less fun to invite Tess because she's the person that's being so good, like taking a nun to a bar or whatever, you don't want to do that.
I missed out on, I'd say, what a college experience should be, whatever that means to you personally. I missed out on what college should offer, I think, and it's because of my own actions. And I would look at myself doing these things, saying no, staying in all the time, and I'd just be like, well, I don't care because this feels better. And two of those girls had asked me about it, like I said, at the end of summer, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. You don't know what you're talking about, because I was in denial at that point.
When Tessa first stopped eating, when she went to Weight Watchers, she was following the program. I mean, she was writing down all this stuff. You're supposed to journal your food, and she was counting her points, and then she was saving points. And I'm looking at this stuff like, what are you doing? How many points? How do you find out all this stuff? So it became points for everything. And then she lost a lot of weight, and we were like, okay, no more points, enough with this. But then she was becoming secretive about it.
That whole summer she had been living with me, she knew I was running a lot and eating not so much, but it always looked like I was eating, but it was just produce and vegetables. And she saw me getting thinner, but since she saw me every day, it wasn't a drastic change.
She looked really thin to me, but you get used to seeing somebody looking like that.
My brother really was the one that said something to my mom one day about what's wrong with her.
We went to the beach that day when Russell and Christine were there, and when she got up to go get a drink up at the, they sell like a little bit of food up there, and Russell said to me, "What the hell is going on with her?"
You can just see her change in her physique, and really that one day we went to the beach and she put on a bikini and she looked just like a skeleton.
You could see like all her backbone, her vertebrae were just like
And then so my mom addressed me later that night and said, what is going on? And it was like a dam opening. I was just like, I don't know, blah.
I guess his opinion was really what did it. I mean, somebody coming from a little bit of the outside saying to her, you don't look good. You look sick. I'm really worried about you.
My mom's been saying that for a while. It's easy to shrug off from Tessa's perspective, oh, it's just mom being motherly and being overprotective. But I feel like when she heard it from her brother, who, doesn't mess around and tells her to her straight, that she took it more seriously.
I was by no means ready physically to start putting on weight and just be completely throw my habits aside. But I realized at that moment how horrible that summer had been, what time I'd wasted, how much brain capacity I'd wasted on trying to calculate every single thing that went in my mouth. I can remember actually eating so much that night when she told me, because I was just suddenly just I want food, all this food I've been missing. I ate a jar of peanut butter, just things like that.
Her willingness, I think that was her tipping point. So she wanted to get better.
Basically told me that she ate a spoonful of peanut butter, which was one of the first things that she had done in years. I was like, holy crap, I can't believe you haven't eaten peanut butter in such a long time.
I just remember that night so clearly because I was eating so much, and that's just, it was a big part of it. And because I was like, look, I am ready for this change. I can do this.
It's just really difficult to see someone that you love so much struggle with something that just, from an outsider's perspective, seems like something so trivial. It's like, oh, just eat the food. Just eat the food. Put the food in your mouth and eat it. What's the big problem?
Sometimes I just feel like, stop. Just stop. If I made pizza, would you have a piece? Nope. Still doesn't do that.
But I mean, over the years, you start to learn exactly what's going on inside someone who struggles from this head.
We learned a lot.
And it's just, I feel terrible for her that she has to deal with this every single day, every single minute of every single day. Thinking about what she ate, what she's going to eat, what she's going to eat next, what she's not going to eat, how much she ate, counting calories, counting workout, steps, everything. Just her mind is constantly at work.
I think it made us really aware of eating disorders in general, what to expect from somebody that has it. We all did our own reading about it.
As that year progressed in my junior year, I was still very upset all the time, but I knew what I had to do. I was starting to see a therapist. My mom made me see a therapist when I was at school.
I was scared that she was going to get to a point where she wasn't going to come back, or that she was going to do so much damage to her body that it was going to be something that in her adult life, as she gets older, she was going to have problems.
So I would look up what would happen to you if you had anorexia, and your bones would start getting brittle, you lose your hair, and I noticed that these things were happening, but I was just like, oh, that's weird. My hair's getting really thin. Must be summertime, it's too hot to have a lot of hair, and I'd make up these crap excuses for these things, and I would, you may have children in the future. I was just like, I don't even want kids, so whatever, I don't care about that. Your skin would get really dry and you'd probably get acne. I got that, but I've always had acne. I had an excuse for everything. Since I was never diagnosed with anorexia, because you really need to meet strict criteria, I was never I could have gotten to the weight range eventually, but I never did. So to me, since I wasn't diagnosed with it, I didn't have anything. Nothing was wrong. But there's so much in between of those two things. I didn't, again, start really talking about it with anyone until I started my blog in March of 2011. And that's when I started really telling my story, telling what I feel each day, what sort of plans I make each day. And as I wrote more and more, I got people reading it, and people would comment to be like, I can so relate to this. I can't believe it's like you're saying my own thoughts. And to me, that was just like, wow, other people feel like I do. It was just nice knowing that I was not alone. And as I wrote more and more, because I really enjoy writing, I found that I never had self-confidence, and I liked the way I wrote, and that made me feel like, okay, I do have this ability to connect with people, and I do have this ability to express my feelings, maybe help other people. One in particular I remember is from a mother of a daughter who had it, and she said the mom directed her daughter to my blog, and she said her daughter's gotten a lot better because of it. And I heard that, I was just like, what? Like, I didn't even plan to have that kind of influence. No intention of that, so, wow.
I'm so proud of her with that blog, because here she was blogging every day, talking about how she was feeling and taking pictures, and she would talk about her feelings about her eating and her issues that she still had, or over-exercising, and it was sort of like she gave us all permission to talk about it once she put it out there.
It really helped me understand my own situations, and I would always end on some kind of note, just like, do I really want to be like this the rest of my life? Like, absolutely not.
Do you consider yourself recovered?
That is a question that I have asked myself, and I would say no. The memories are going to be there, and the tendencies to want to go back to that are going to be there. And in this disordered, twisted way, it does make me feel better. But then I start looking back at my past history and realizing that it so didn't. It had the exact opposite effect. So like when I want to restrict, I now have the choice to say, well, I could have this Diet Coke for lunch, or I could have a lunch.
I think she's gotten to be, I would say, her old self, you know, because she was a really happy kid, and then she was this starving person, which was really dark, and now she's getting back there. She's happier and much more social, willing to take on tasks, like she's going to nursing school right now, and that's a lot of work, and plus she has a job. She's really worked on being able to do a lot of good, healthy things for herself.
I would hope that she would be able to make a full recovery and put this behind her and be able to go out for burgers and beers. That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
I absolutely love her so much. I even love this part. It's been a real journey for her.
It's been a slow transition to living to eat, because food has been playing #1 role in my life forever. I was living to eat for so long, but I've been trying to get more to just having it be a secondary role, that I just survive on it, as opposed to just making my entire situation around it.
Thanks for that, Erin. And you can find out more about Tessa's story by visiting her blog at amazingasset.com. Really an incredible story. But now I'm joined by Emily Gordon, a clinical psychologist in private practice and at McLean Hospital, who's worked with several adolescents with eating disorders. Thanks so much for joining us. So where do eating disorders stem from? Is it a matter of environment or DNA?
You started us off with like the $1 million question. Everyone is dying to know the answer to that. I think it's complicated. Eating disorders come from genetics, but there's also, a sort of interplay between genetics and the environment. Some of the things that we think it has to do with is certain personality factors like obsessiveness or perfectionism. So it's a complicated picture as to where they come from.
Why are eating disorders so prominent, though, in our society?
We live in a society that values thinness. And so there's certainly a lot of evidence that shows that the media can influence the onset of eating disorders. I think one of the things that's really important to know to understand when you're talking about eating disorders is that there's a preoccupation, I think, with being thin, but eating disorders themselves are not so prevalent in our society. The rates of prevalence are still pretty low. For anorexia nervosa, it's about 0.3%. For bulimia nervosa, it's about 1%. So we're still talking relatively small numbers, but they still can be very serious and have devastating effects.
Yeah, definitely, like you said, small numbers, but when it happens to anyone, I would imagine that's fairly devastating. Is this something that's also experienced in other countries?
It is. There was a really fascinating study done by Ann Becker out of, she's at Mass General, and she was able to go into Fiji when, right about the time where they introduced TV, and they measured rates of, sort of valuation of thinness and eating disorder behavior in adolescent girls. It's a culture that, sort of values a robust body size and values eating, and she showed that within a very short amount of time of the onset of, the introduction of this Western media that the rates of body dissatisfaction and eating disorder behavior in these adolescent girls that wanting to be thin really increased.
And are there any major differences between the way that men see body image and the way that women see body image?
I think an eating disorder is an eating disorder, sort of no matter who has it. That being said, I think that in our culture, whereas I think there's an emphasis for women on being thin and small, for men, I think that there's a little bit more of a valuation on sort of muscle mass and muscle definition. There's another set of really interesting studies that has looked at boys' toys, over the course of like the last 20 or 30 years. If any of you remember, when sort of G.I. Joe or some of those action figures were first introduced, you can see just by looking at the toys that the size of the figures has increased, the sort of muscle definition of the figures has increased. I think they've done the same thing with Barbie dolls. If you really take a look at and understand the media and the things that our kids are exposed to, it really starts at an early age.
Well, then that brings up another interesting question, which is what age are people most susceptible to eating disorders?
So there's sort of two median age of onsets, and typically they happen in adolescence. The first is at about age 12 to 13, and the next happens at about age 17 to 18. So we really see that anorexia, I think, is more common to start early on, and then sometimes we see bulimia later on. The sort of points of transition in life can be a time of onset of eating disorders, which, isn't terribly different from onset of other things. I think, transitions leave everybody vulnerable to depression, anxiety, substance abuse, sort of other disorders. So eating disorders in that way are no different.
And how often do people go and get some kind of treatment or go to rehab for eating disorders like that, but then fall back into their own old habits,
Sometimes what we see is that someone who starts out with anorexia can later develop bulimia. So there's sort of an evolution of the eating disorder that happens. So we don't really fully, I suppose in individual cases we could look at, we could have some hypotheses, but overall we don't know for sure.
Okay, well then let's talk treatment. What exactly is the process for helping somebody combat an eating disorder?
Right, so I think that certainly support from friends and family is important, but professional treatment is really important.
In the story, we also speak with this girl's mother, with her siblings. She even discusses the reactions that her friends had. If I'm a friend of someone who has an eating disorder, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a really hard position to be in. I think if you're concerned about someone, I think it's important to be thoughtful, but to approach the person. But I think that the best thing you can do as a friend is to let your friend know of your concerns and try to help them get the right treatment.
All right, well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And when we come back, you've seen them all over town, but where exactly did they come from? Reporter Christian Berger in Aragon uncovers the newest revolution of fast food, food trucks. When we think of fast food, healthy isn't typically what comes to mind. This new food truck sensation may change the way we all view the fast food business.
In just over 5 years, Clover Food Lab has set out to redefine the fast food industry in Boston. Bringing the first modern food truck to this area of the Great Northeast, the definition of Meals on Wheels has been revolutionized. Considered one of the first food laboratories, Clover has stepped away from traditional fast food and set out to provide its customers with healthy organic alternatives that keep people coming back again and again. Follow myself and Emerson Independent Video as we find out how this food lab is being consumed.
The differences between Clover and other restaurants are massive, but not always apparent to most customers. And that's okay with us. I mean, we want you to taste the food and love it. But just going through some of the biggest differences, the first probably just the fact that we make our food, and that includes our drinks. You buy an iced tea, we made that iced tea that day. You buy the popovers in the morning, somebody cracked eggs that morning. sifted flour that morning, measured out the milk, made up the batter, and then cooked the popovers for you. So all of our food's done that way, and you might think that a lot of restaurants are making their food or even some of it, but it's really not the case.
I think what makes Clover different than other food trucks, whether they're in Boston or around the country, is I think a lot of trucks are on this local food movement, and there's a lot of this, farm to table. But I think we're sort of trying to break the mold and trying to not fit in a box. We're pretty much open to any sort of cultural, food, but we're just trying to cook seasonal, fresh food, really, that makes you feel better. That's not too expensive. We're trying to open it up to all different levels of the population.
I'm Christian, here on the Clover food truck at MIT with Sarah, the manager who's been working here for 2 years. Pretty excited to be here today. We're going to be making a sandwich. Sarah, can you first tell us a little bit about what it's like to work on a food truck?
You might think that working on the food truck is a little cramped and small, but it's actually it's really neat because you're outside all the time. You're basically working outside, so the weather really matters, and you sort of get interaction with the outside, which isn't normal for food service. So that's I think the really cool part about working on a truck as opposed to maybe in a traditional kitchen.
Awesome. I clearly didn't come prepared. I assumed that in the truck it was going to be a lot warmer, but it's not.
Even in fine dining restaurants, a lot of it's made, several days ahead, and then there are shortcuts. There are things that are sourced from purveyors. So that's probably the largest difference. And compared to other fast food, it's just unheard of. Nobody makes food that way. We don't have, related to that, we don't have any freezers in the entire company. It's all made daily. And we get 2 or 3 deliveries a day, and we cook all day long. Our French fries, for example, we cut potato, and then we fry it for you. That difference in the way we make food is just a really big deal. I can't overstate it. It affects everything we do every day. And I think it affects how everything tastes.
All of our sandwiches start off with a whole wheat pita. In the chickpea fritter, there's a layer of hummus, cucumber tomato salad, some pickles down at the bottom, and then we have our 5 falafel balls, a bunch of pickled veggies, and tahini to top it off.
We have a menu that's built to change daily. Over a 2-month period, about 70 or 80% of that menu will change. And what that allows us to do is to move with the seasonality of produce. So it allows us to feature the best ingredients we can get at any given time. So when there's a lot of fantastic tomatoes, we sell a lot of tomatoes. And when we can't get great tomatoes anymore, we back off on how many tomatoes are on by literally changing our menu. So this is really different about Clover, and it affects the kind of food you're going to eat. It also affects how much of your dollar is going back to the local economy, because it's not just a few meat items or a few dairy items that we're sourcing locally. We source, the low point of the year is April, and we'll source about 40 to 45% of our product from the Northeast, which is a huge number. And the high point of the year is August, September, and we'll source 95% of our product from the Northeast. And those numbers, there's no one comes anywhere close. The most locavore restaurants are probably at their max 35%. So our low point of the year is above what you'd probably find other places at their max. We do anywhere between 40 and 60% of our menu is organic, which puts us above anybody in the Boston area. There's one restaurant in New York that's all organic, but other than that, I think we're probably the highest on the East Coast.
Clover's goals to affecting sustainability and our philosophy basically is we're trying to positively impact the environment. So we're trying to not only reduce the carbon footprint, but try to flip it and go the other way. We want to have really fresh ingredients that are made pretty much in the last day or two to nourish our customers and to make them want to come back.
We compost everything that we send out, so we don't have recycling bins, we don't have trash bins, we just have one receptacle, which is compost. And that's pretty unusual. We have, it's fun, we have a lot of restaurants contacting us now trying to figure out how to do that, but I don't know of anybody who's made that switch to 100% compostable yet. It's a pretty big deal. So those are some really large differences that affect the kind of food we make and how we operate day to day.
I think it's about it being fresh. It's about it being food that is made the day of, made the day before. I think that's when fast food can be really, really amazing.
Clover also prides themselves on not only providing organic food items and ingredients, but also local sort of organic item. So where exactly does the rutabaga from today's soup come from?
Right, so the rutabaga comes from Western Mass, a farm in Western Mass called Winter Moon Roots. And we actually did a CSA program with them, and they're just these giant rutabagas. So that's like a really great farm that we get a lot of our winter vegetables from.
Gotcha.
Another thing, for example, like Pedro is selling fries right now. Our potatoes, they come from a few different places. I believe right now our potatoes are coming from Hadley, Massachusetts, and those potatoes make really great fries. We also get some from Prince Edward Island, and every once in a while from Nevada, depending on the time of year.
Gotcha. And you mentioned CSAs. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So if you don't know what a CSA is, it's you buy a share of a farm in the beginning of the season, and then all season, like the months during the summer and the beginning of the fall, you get a box of vegetables every week. And you can buy small shares or large shares, but you get sort of like a variety of vegetables. You get to choose the farm. Right now we're working with like 6 different farms, and it's pretty exciting to bring people, to bring the farm's business from local people.
To Boston.
Yeah, to Boston, exactly.
So we're standing outside the Clover food truck. We just made their most popular sandwich, the chickpea fritter. I'm really excited to taste it. I don't know what it's gonna be. I've never had it before, but here we go.
I'm here with Dr. Anurag Shankar, who's the Senior Research Scientist at the Department of Nutrition at the Harvard School of Public Health. And Doctor, thanks so much for joining us. So you could almost say we're going through a bit of a food truck renaissance. So their popularity has really just skyrocketed in the past couple of years. Why do we think that is?
That's a very good question, Josh, and it's nice to be here with you today. The increase in food truck availability and use of food trucks really has been linked in many ways to the overall increase in the need for convenience to access food. Someone can just walk out and say, look, I want to have Indian food for this, I want to have Mexican food, for this. And so there's certainly a level of appeal there in terms of convenience. The interest in diversity of food consumption is something that has really gone up. And food trucks are able to provide a more diverse range of foods. Look, if you look at the food trucks that are out there now, I mean, they have a range of foods from vegetarian food to Eastern food, Indian food. So that whole variety is there, and that's something that's very appealing. I think people are really enjoying that. And it probably is contributing to some degree to the diversity of different foods that people are consuming.
Now, are food trucks something that we would throw in the category of fast food, or are they kind of in a category of their own?
I think you would put food trucks in the general category of fast food. The way that they operate is a little bit different. So far, in most cases, there are smaller operations sourcing the food from the local area. But they're more integrated part of the local economy in that context. So what we traditionally may refer to as fast food, which is corporate fast food, the food truck would certainly be different from that. But it's still fast food in the sense of certainly you can get it quickly and has some of the characteristics of fast food, which is that it's restricted to things that tend to be easily prepared beforehand or that can be quickly prepared on the spot at the truck. I'm not fully convinced that Clover is a typical representative of what's going on right now in the food truck business. And Clover has a certain focus on promoting themselves as a healthy food choice, a healthy fast food choice, or a food truck choice. Some of the other trucks, that's really not their framework. So I think Clover's a little bit different. It probably is good that they're attempting to promote foods, or at least their philosophy, as stated, is to promote more healthy foods.
And do you think fast food has gotten any healthier over the years?
I would say overall that fast food has gotten healthier. Some of the offerings have gotten healthier. Now, I think one thing important to recognize is that we're talking about a very small increase in what might be considered healthy. Is that the type of increase that's going to lead to a healthy lifestyle, healthy eating habits, and so forth? No, it's not. So there's two forces that you need to balance here, really, you know, and those are the convenience to get food when you're hungry in our fast-paced society, and balancing that with the need to actually consume a healthy diet. Okay, so these things are compatible, but in order to do that, you have to plan. Getting into the habit, especially as a young person, of how you're going to eat and what you're going to eat is really important. You have to plan what you're going to eat in advance. It means that you have to decide, well, if I am going to eat at a fast food establishment or a restaurant or a food truck, which of those food trucks is really offering me that?
Dr. Shankar, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, more Consumed. Food is almost second nature to us, but as we've seen, it has huge effects on our everyday lives. But ultimately, we have the ability to make healthy decisions. It's just a question of if we'll follow through. We need food, but it's easy to lose control over our eating habits. Whether you live to eat or eat to live, food is a relationship. It's up to you to make it a healthy one. From everyone here at EIV News, I'm Joshua Sackheim, and this has been our special presentation of Consumed.